cancer treatment plan includes skin surface brachytherapy and weekend fishing with his best buddies. The Bay State Regional Cancer Program, experts in cancer every step of the way.
Over the past 100 years, locally owned Pride stores have enjoyed serving our local communities. Join us as we celebrate throughout 2017 with special events and drawings for our customers, and especially join us in supporting WGBY.
Hi, I'm Luis Alberto Urrea, author of Into the Beautiful North, and you're watching WGBY Springfield.
Tonight, with Veterans Day approaching, we honor those who have served this country and share some of their stories.
I really am glad that America looks at veterans in a different way. I still think there's a disconnect, but it's getting better.
Stay with us for a Connecting Point special. Never forget.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers and by...
For more than a century, the Springfield Regional Chamber of Commerce has been at the heart of the business community. At a time of unprecedented growth and a vibrant future ahead, I am excited that with partners like WGBY, we will continue to drive business development in new and innovative ways to make our region the place to build a business and make a life.
As a regional health insurance company, we are committed to improving the lives and health of people in our community. WGBY shares our commitment by providing quality programming that enriches the lives of many. Please join Health New England in supporting WGBY.
Tonight, we pay tribute to all veterans. Over the next half hour, you'll hear from veterans and their loved ones on a variety of topics. 4 veterans from the Vietnam era, Robert Schmidt, Doug Anderson, Joe Ames, and Lyden Siobhan, discussed their service in that controversial war with producer Dave Frazier.
I'm from Northampton, Massachusetts, and I went to high school up there. I went out to Ottawa, Kansas, and played Division II football for 2 years. So I was somewhat of an athlete.
What I knew of Vietnam is what I saw on TV. What I was seeing, I was like, gee, it's something I would never want to be a part of.
A lot of them were in because that's what you did as a young man in those days. We were the children of the World War II generation, and that's what you did.
Being in Vietnam was kind of a nightmare, quite frankly. I whitewash it all the time, and I'm being told not to do that.
My best friend was killed there, and I had some kind of a revenge. I was only, 20 years old, so there was like a revenge factor going on, which was probably immature, but, we played football together, so it seemed like the thing to do, go where he died.
They would send you an envelope, and it had in the envelope the letter, and it had a subway token and a meal ticket, which was both taped to the letter.
I went there in July of '68 and came home in June of '69. Basically, it was all GIs who were in various forms of disarray and smells and colors and whatever. And I'm sure I smelled horrible. I mean, I don't think I ever had a real clean shower ever the whole year I was there.
They were riflemen, squad leaders, platoon commanders. A lot of them had just gotten out of high school. Some of them had not completed high school.
We had an experienced guy named Bates from Dallas, and 2 of us got on one side of the trail and 2 got on the other, and I was watching Bates, and we were eating our lunch, and all of a sudden Bates puts his helmet on and starts signaling for us to get down. We basically watched 500 or 600 North Vietnamese regulars come walking through, and they looked dead serious about what they were up to. That's enough to scare anybody.
One of my jobs, I was actually in charge of a pay team. We had to process everybody's pay voucher, and I was an enlisted man, so we did all the enlisted men, and so I knew when guys were killed, and we had to close out their records, and it was like, and I had to do it. And, I was involved in that. It's kind of a gruesome job.
As I'm standing at my post, I hear machine gun fire, and I'm sure the other guys did. So now we're on high alert. We hear this machine gun fire. So I'm pointing my weapon at that direction, and I look out at the tall grass, and I see a person. I see the hat, and it's getting bigger because it's coming towards me. So, I say to myself, well, I had to make a decision whether I was going to shoot or not.
You hate to say it, it's too much, too little, too late type thing, but that's kind of how I feel. I mean, I wouldn't let the people that are thanking me know that, because they weren't there in '69,
It always makes me feel uncomfortable when people say, oh, thank you for your service. I'm like, well, I don't know what to say. I just say, well, thank you, but I always feel kind of embarrassed or uncomfortable. It feels awkward to me.
I really am glad that, that America looks at veterans in a different way. I still think there's still a disconnect, but it's getting better. Even the VA has its problems, but they're working on it and trying their best to make sure that that 1% who, give so much is taken care of.
Veterans services are available from a variety of federal, state, and local agencies. I sat down with veteran service directors in Pittsfield and Chicopee to discuss a number of issues. Jim Clark of Pittsfield started with the details about the new Veterans ID card.
The card's going to get issued via an internet program right now. It's going to be vet.gov, where you go on there and validate who you are as a veteran, and then you'll upload a picture of yourself. And from there, they will send a card to you. So there won't be any real physical interaction. But the card itself is just that. It's an ID card. It identifies you as a veteran, and that's pretty much it. Even though the VA has been given the responsibility to do it, it's not really a VA card.
And how is it different than the Veterans Health Identification Card?
The Veterans Health Identification Card is that you are qualified as a veteran to receive health care through the VA.
But Stephanie, in Massachusetts, veterans can opt to have a little indicator on their license, right? So is this card even needed in Massachusetts?
It is. There's many that choose not to add it to their license. There's many veterans who would like to choose when they promote their service, and having it on their driver's license, you have to give your driver's license for so many transactions that they may not want that information disclosed. And Massachusetts is one of only a few states that I know of that offer the veteran identifier on the driver's license. So using the VA federal system to administer it allows everyone in the country to have it versus waiting for the DMV, RMV organizations in each state.
So this law was passed in 2015 that sort of set up this system, but we're moving forward with it now. Can people actually go online right now and get these cards?
A press release will be put out by the VA. I'm going to put it out in our local papers when it's out there, because honestly, it's probably 10, 12 times a week I get asked that question.
So if people have more questions, what they can do is probably contact their local Veteran Service Office,
Absolutely.
Which each of you are leading. And with veteran services, I think in talking to both of you, there are a lot of questions. There's the federal level, there's the state level, and then there's also local service levels that you all are providing. How does a veteran sort of navigate those different layers?
I think exactly because of that, many veterans don't seek out supports and benefits. We are very lucky here in Massachusetts to have such an expansive and supportive Department of Veteran Services. And there's a representative in every community that administers the state law Chapter 115 benefits, which is an income supplementation program for low to no income veterans. And we also are a resource to navigate the abundance of programs that are available. It's intimidating and very confusing. The VSOs, we're a state level city-funded position, and we work in conjunction with the VA, which is a federal system. So we can definitely aid with communicating with the VA. Many times I do a 3-way call with my veterans to help them navigate conversations with the VA. And then there's community-based, and there's other federal organizations like Soldier On, Wounded Warrior. There's a lot of programs, too, that sometimes seek to exploit veterans and that are not legitimate organizations. And that's part of our job as well, is to vet those programs so people know what's a valid program, what they're eligible for, and what would benefit them and their families.
So you mentioned Soldier On. Soldier On is one of the organizations in the region that's working on homelessness, which is homelessness and suicide are really some big issues that veterans are dealing with. The homelessness piece, the VA came out and said that they wanted to work to end homelessness. And I understand that Connecticut in our region is a state that has announced that it has actually made strides and eliminated homelessness there in that state. I know Massachusetts has made some inroads. Where are we with homelessness among veterans in Massachusetts?
That's a great question, and one of the answers to that is we'll never get to zero. What the term that they use is functional zero. We've taken care of all the veterans who do want to be helped. There's a bunch of people that do not want to be helped. They don't want to be, boxed into a corner or what have you. So they deem the term functional zero, that all those that we can help have been helped. And we have by names lists, and we deal not just with the veteran service officers. We have the continuum of care groups that help identify those by name list of veterans and their families who are either homeless or soon to be homeless or potentially homeless. And you mentioned too with Soldier On. I mean, I'm very lucky in Pittsfield to have Soldier On. Stephanie also has a new facility in Chicopee. But between Chicopee, Agawam, Northampton, and Pittsfield, we've got this part covered. But I can tell you honestly, there's some people that just do not want to be helped, or they're seasonally don't want to be helped. Hey, the weather's nice. I'm good right now. Come the bad weather, I'll come talk to you. But you've identified them and you have them by name.
And many of them, there's barriers to receiving those benefits, like substance abuse or alcohol abuse issues. And if they haven't come to terms with wanting to resolve those issues, then they're not eligible to participate in those groups. And they have created supplemental programs on a short-term basis to help reduce those barriers that don't have those requirements. But it is part of a multi-step process to allow them to become healthy and stable and independent.
So certainly lots of issues that veterans can appeal to either their VSOs here, or either you, Jim, in Pittsfield, or you, Stephanie. If people need more help, there are also numbers. Those are Veterans Crisis Line, if they're dealing with suicide in particular, and that's 800-273-8255, or they can reach out to their local VSOs. Thanks so much for being in studio to talk about some of these issues with us today. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having us.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is now recognized as a significant wound of war. But PTSD among many Vietnam veterans, including Gordon Fletcher Howell, went unrecognized for years. His daughter, Jessica Jimison, shared details with producer Dave Frazier.
He was the youngest of 4 kids and, just very patriotic and, go do the right thing. And so he thought Marine Corps was the way to do that and, be well respected. And it kind of all changed for him at TET was really the big turning point for him when he described what he developed as cognitive dissonance, coming to understand that, in fact, if he were a Vietnamese person, he would become a Viet Cong, a VC, and hate himself, and that was really hard for him. He was kind of not his normal self when he got home, did not announce that he was home, came home to California, and he was from Arlington, Massachusetts, did not tell his parents that he was back, went out to a bar in California once he got off the base, which I think was San Diego, where he came home to, and went out to a bar knowing that everyone would want to hear what was actually going on in Vietnam. And so he started to share his story, and very quickly, with body language and, whatever the verbal language was that he received as feedback, he learned that nobody wanted to hear his story. And that, in fact, people would much rather have their heads in the sand, and, that he, although he could bear witness, it wasn't welcome. I was very attuned to my dad's emotions, both my parents' emotions, but my dad had a much stronger personality than my mom. And the first times I probably remember trying to ask him about, to tell me about Vietnam, I was probably maybe 4 or 5. And what I remember is that he would start to tell me some story from Vietnam, and he would quickly start to tear up, and at that point the subject needed to change. He couldn't tell me anymore. So from a very, very young age, I knew that there were things that he couldn't share, and I knew that they were painful things. And you know, he was a Marine. Marines don't cry, and so he didn't cry, but he started to, but he wouldn't cry. And so it was, you know, many years later, it was during the first Gulf War, when his PTSD kind of erupted to a degree that I guess had only been previously seen before I was born, which was like full dysfunction. And it became finally obvious that we needed to do something. And he did. That's when he reached out to the VA, and he reached out to Veterans Education Project and the VFW and Veterans for Peace. He kind of reached out in every direction to see what there was, and you know, where would the chips fall for him? Where did he feel supported and like he could make the contribution that he wanted to make to society with his stories, with his experiences. And he ended up with 3 carousels of slides from one of his best Vietnam buddies. And, you know, multiple times per week, my dad and I would sit out in the barn, and he would just flip through those slides and cry and tell me the stories. He told me, you know, he finally told me all the stories. And it was incredible bonding. I feel like I'm one of the luckiest people in the world who gets to sit with a war vet and feel their pain and feel their passion. And for a person who's so fraught with pain to find peace, getting to be part of that experience for my dad and even for some other people along the journey has been, you can't even describe the magnitude of the blessing. That's the first thing I say when I learn someone's a veteran, a war veteran or otherwise, is thank you for your service. So when I hear it, it makes me choke up. And when I say it, it makes me just overflow with gratitude and with emotion, and also with understanding for what that person, some understanding of what that person might be facing in their life, but also what their daughters and sons are facing, and what their wives or girlfriends are facing, and what their communities are facing, and just the isolation that the person might be feeling. And I just always hope that I can reach through that isolation and have that connection for just a moment, and let them know that although they're sacrificing, somebody appreciates it.
The PTSD Jessica Jimison's father has went unrecognized for years, but now there's more awareness of this seemingly invisible war wound and programs to help treat the problem, such as Ward 8 in Northampton. Correspondent Carrie McGrath reports.
Joe Ross loves to spend time with his family, his wife Kate and little girl Ashlyn. Joe spends a lot of time with the 5-year-old, sharing the responsibility of homeschooling her. He's grateful for the freedom to be able to do that, and in fact, spent his military career protecting freedom at home and abroad.
I joined because I wanted to do something for the country, and I wanted to, protect another guy fighting at my side. So of course 9/11 happened, and it just made it more of a reason.
Joe enlisted in the Army Reserves in 1998, serving in the 94th MP Company, or military police, based in New Hampshire. He served in Iraq from 2003 to 2004, and then again from 2009 to 2010, this time in a National Guard unit based in Ware.
For that first Iraq deployment, it was challenging, it was busy, it was scary, it was nonstop. It was like no time to breathe, no time to really think. Nothing really kicked in until you finished and you came home.
What kicked in at home, he says, were the thoughts, the what-ifs, and the flashbacks of the battlefield. He says he still replays the day when he lost his colonel.
We wanted to go, and we kept on being told to stand our ground and wait. I had to sit there and hear it all on the radio. I could hear the gunfire and the chaos in the background. I could hear his emotions calling over the radio.
Joe didn't recognize his PTSD right away, but one day, when driving in his car with his wife, they were nearly hit by another vehicle. He says it triggered something.
I got back into the car. I was heated and sweating. We started to leave, and that's when Kate said, "What just happened?" And I said, "I don't know."
Joe, who has a service dog named Monroe, sought help at the VA in Leeds. There he found a program called Ward 8, a 6-week inpatient program to help veterans suffering from PTSD. It also helped his wife, Kate, understand what was happening.
As I became more aware of it and talking to people up at Ward 8 with the program, it kind of shed some light on a lot of what he's been through.
Dr. Scott Cornelius is a clinical psychologist with the VA Central Western Massachusetts healthcare system. Dr. Cornelius says the program offers follow-up outpatient sessions. He says veterans come in from all over the country for treatment.
One of the benefits that we have on this unit is that they are surrounded by other veterans who have been through war situations like they have. So they have this built-in kind of community that already gets them.
74-year-old Preston Hood certainly gets what Joe Ross is facing.
I can remember an incident when I got off in our C-130 coming back. We did come back as a group, but we came out and went off base in civilian clothes, and there were a bunch of protesters out there that were calling us baby killers.
The author and former school teacher and father of 3 went through Ward 8 in 2001.
Ward 8 is special in that I can give back to other veterans. They need guidance, and it's something as a Vietnam vet we never got.
According to the VA, 20 veterans a day commit suicide in this country. And the hope is that programs like Ward 8 will let those who are struggling know that there's help.
I also had a son who was a Marine. He committed suicide. And so I come back for that. And I also am a big advocate for veterans' families and all the veterans that have committed suicide.
We lost this veteran about 1.5 years ago to opiate overdose.
Randy Wessels, a peer support specialist at the VA, served in the Army National Guard from 1998 to 2004 and was deployed to Bosnia. Randy, who went through Ward 8, lost a friend to suicide. He was also able to talk another vet out of taking his life.
I've had the 2 o'clock in the morning phone call, and the veteran, I could hear him racking the slide of an automatic handgun. I could hear him dry firing it, and I was telling him unload it. I think I spent about 4 hours on the phone with that veteran that night. He's still here. He's still around today. He's actually struggling with stage 4 lung cancer from the burn pits, and it spread to his brain. But you know, he made a big difference in my life by listening to me and talking with me that night.
John Parody, an Air Force veteran who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, is now an outreach specialist for the VA New England healthcare system.
We really need our nation, our community to wake up to this statistic. If we can get the veteran to us and we can get them the care, then we know we're going to be able to reduce that number significantly.
Joe Ross says he's proud of his service and proud of the people he served with, and continues to work on the issues that followed him home.
It changes you. You come back a different person. You don't expect it. You want to go back to the old Joe Ross. You want Joe Ross again. You know, because we put on a face and you smile and you live life, but you're not living life. You're hiding, really.
Thank you for joining us this evening. We leave you with a reflection from Vietnam veteran Doug Anderson, also a poet and fiction writer. He discussed the inspiration for his work titled Night Ambush with producer Dave Fraser.
We would go out on night ambush patrols and smear mosquito repellent all over us. I mean, under our socks and everything. And the only place that we didn't smear mosquito repellent was our lips, because obviously we didn't want it in our mouths. It tasted terrible and it was toxic. So the mosquitoes would all congregate around our mouth. And after a while, you'd been bitten so many times on the lips, it felt like you'd been to the dentist. It was just absolutely numb. And when I was thinking about this, a whole poem came out of that body memory, which I'll read right now. Night Ambush. We are stilled, lips swollen with mosquito bites. A tree line opens out onto paddies quartered by dikes, a moon in each. And in the center, the hedged island of a village floats in its own time, ribboned with smoke. Someone is cooking fish. Whispers move across water, children and old people. Anyone between is a target. It is so quiet you can hear a safety clicked off all the way on the other side. Things live in my hair. I do not bathe. I have thrown away my underwear. I have forgotten the why of everything. I sense an indifference larger than anything I know. All that will remain of us is rusting metal disappearing in vines. Above the fog that clots the hill ahead, a red tracer arcs and dims. A black snake slides off the paddy dike into the water and makes the moon shiver.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers and by...
For more than a century, the Springfield Regional Chamber of Commerce has been at the heart of the business community. At a time of unprecedented growth and a vibrant future ahead, I am excited that with partners like WGBY, we will continue to drive business development in new and innovative ways to make our region the place to build a business and make a life.
As a regional health insurance company, we are committed to improving the lives and health of people in our community. WGBY shares our commitment by providing quality programming that enriches the lives of many. Please join Health New England in supporting WGBY.
Next, join WGBY and host Carrie Saldo for a panel discussion about the local impact of the Vietnam War, with studio audience and viewer participation in Reflecting on the Vietnam War, a community dialogue.
PBS had a special on Pearl Harbor, and once Landon started watching the show about the Arizona, he completely became fascinated.
That's Donald Stratton, and that's me.
And then his Christmas wish this year was to meet Donald Stratton, one of the survivors from the Arizona.
So good to see you, buddy.
Everything that Landon has learned from PBS, it's immeasurable.
This is for you.
Thank you, big guy.
He is living proof of the effect that PBS has had on his life.
Kids, we were all pretty scared. We had each other, and we brought that to the music. Help! I always like singing Help because I meant it. It's real.
Go behind the scenes with the Beatles on tour November 25th.
American Masters gives us hope.
My fans call me Bob.
Bob Hope.
Well, they finally got me.
From vaudeville and Broadway to Hollywood,
Road to Morocco.
Radio and TV, he gave us a century of laughter.
Throw the bombs out! No, not me.
Join the stars he inspired.
It's Bob Hope.
And the troops he entertained.
He gave him a good time in the worst of times.
With Thanks for the Memories, enjoy a look back at Bob.
This is Bob Hope.
On American Masters.
A portrait of comedian Bob Hope, November 27th on WGBY.
This month in Passport, your on-demand library of the best of PBS.
He said, "Welcome home." It was just a powerful moment.
He was here under my very nose.
How do you sleep at night, George?
Perhaps you should ask Elizabeth.
We could never have imagined the channels, the lakes.
We are going through an area no one has gone through before.
These and other shows are available on Passport. Become a member of this PBS station. Sign in and start streaming today.
Support for WGBY comes from our contributing viewers and by
Hadley Garden Center on Route 9 in Hadley, Massachusetts, offering a full selection of indoor and outdoor gardening supplies, including bird feeders, earth-friendly pest control, and organic fertilizer. Hadley Garden Center.
The UMass Amherst Fine Arts Center presenting the Underwater Bubble Show, a lavish production that will transport audiences to an imaginary world bursting with possibilities. Thursday, November 30th, Fine Arts Center Concert Hall. Tickets and information at fineartscenter.com.
Over the past 100 years, locally owned Pride stores have enjoyed serving our local communities. Join us as we celebrate throughout 2017 with special events and drawings for our customers, and especially join us in supporting WGBY.
Hi, I'm Luis Alberto Urrea, author of Into the Beautiful North, and you're watching WGBY Springfield.
Coming up, WGBY's latest in its Community Dialogue series, we will discuss the Vietnam War. Stay with us.
Reflecting on the Vietnam War, a community dialogue is brought to you by the contributing viewers of WGBY.
It's been more than 40 years since the Vietnam War ended, and during the 1960s and 1970s, for Americans, it became a gruesome conflict afar and a point of contention here at home. In recent weeks, you may have watched Ken Burns and Lynn Novick's latest documentary, The Vietnam War, which included the experiences of many people from across the country and Vietnam. Tonight's Town Hall Forum is an opportunity for people in this region to discuss their experiences related to the war, with participation from our panel and studio audience, as well as questions posed by you watching and streaming online. Share your comments and questions using the hashtag WGBY Now, let me introduce our panelists. Christian Appy is the author of 3 books on the American War in Vietnam. Patriots, The Vietnam War Remembered from All Sides, won the Massachusetts Book Award for Nonfiction in 2004, and he's a history professor at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Tom Gardner organized against the war and for civil rights. He was granted conscientious objector status in 1967. He's a professor of communication at Westfield State University, and among his courses is one on the history and culture and media of Vietnam. Liam Nguyen was born in 1973 in Vietnam. His father served as an officer in the South Vietnamese police during the Vietnam War. Liam has lived in the United States for the past decade and is now an assistant professor at Westfield State University. And Gomercindo Gomez is a retired member of the United States Army and a Vietnam War veteran. The Springfield resident has counseled returning veterans for years. He is the president of the Massachusetts chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America. We spoke with several veterans about the Vietnam War, such as Sergeant Gomez. Let's hear from them first.
At the time when I was drafted, many of us, myself included, didn't know a thing about what Vietnam was, why it was, where it was. All we knew was, you're in the Army now, go.
Trong khoảng thời gian mà chiến tranh Việt Nam,
during the Vietnam War, I thought that Americans did not understand the problems with the Vietnam War. They didn't understand. However, I know for sure the fact that the American government understood very well the problems with the Vietnam War, its cause, and where it started from.
All I knew is that I wanted to go over and help out. And I happened to be good in languages. I didn't have a political position. But, you know, partway through the war, I started feeling that we were on the wrong side. I wasn't able to articulate that for many years, but that's what I was feeling, because I worked with Vietnamese people whom I saw in many cases as the people who were caught in the middle.
In our opinions, the Americans need to consider when helping a country. they have to do research and think about their ability and limitations in helping that nation, so that once the U.S. is done, they do not leave those countries in ruin, which is a shame.
Chris, let me start with you. We just heard from Van Bot Phu that the Americans left Vietnam in ruin. You've written 3 books on this topic. What's your perspective on how America left Vietnam?
Well, it would actually be very hard to exaggerate the wreckage we left behind. I mean, just think of the sheer human loss. Something like 3 million Vietnamese died, most of them civilians. Millions more were wounded, displaced, widowed, orphaned. And if you take Cambodia and Laos into consideration, that's another million lost lives. On top of that, thousands of villages were destroyed, most of them by American bombing. The United States dropped 3 times more bombs on Southeast Asia than had been dropped in all of World War II. We poisoned much of the rural countryside with very toxic chemical defoliants to try to destroy the hiding places of the Viet Cong and the communist forces that nature provided. On top of that, the economy was in shambles when we left, and we had created a real refugee crisis. Actually, 2 of them. The first really began during the war itself, where American military policy intentionally drove at least 5 million rural farmers out of the countryside into the cities, so they would no longer support enemy forces. And then at the end of the war, because we so bungled the evacuation at the last minute, there were hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese people that had allied themselves with the government and the military and the United States, who might have wanted to get out, but then could only get out later if they were lucky, fleeing sometimes in very dangerous circumstances, with untold thousands dying at sea or ending up in refugee camps around Southeast Asia. So the only thing, there are a lot of other things. The only thing I would add to that is I think we left behind the American reputation around the world. I mean, if you go back to World War II, we had a very impressive international reputation, but because of Vietnam and other things, by the time the war ended, our international reputation was at its lowest moment, and it was because most of the people around the world, it wasn't that we lost the war, but they felt that we had prosecuted a war that was illegitimate or unnecessary or worse. So it was a real low moment for not just Vietnam, but for the United States.
Sergeant Gomez, I'd like to bring you into the conversation at this point. Some of the things that Chris mentioned, we know now in hindsight, some of the things we knew at the time. For you, when you were serving in Vietnam, when you left, you were 19 years old, and you served your country there in Vietnam, and then you were coming back home. What was your perspective, if any, if you can think back to that 19-year-old soldier when you were leaving the country of Vietnam?
Let's get it from the beginning. When I was 18 years old, that's when I went to Vietnam. And I volunteered to go into military services, and I volunteered to go to Vietnam because I had a brother already in Vietnam. At that time, in AIT, which is Advanced Infantry Training, I was the platoon guy for the whole platoon. And when they found out that I was not going to Vietnam because I asked to go to Korea, I came back, told them, hey guys, I'm not going to Vietnam. That business. I was going to get my stuff whipped. So I ended up volunteering to go to Vietnam with the troops that I had trained with. As I entered military services, I did not know what Vietnam was all about. I didn't even know that there was a war going on. All I have watched was combat in TV. And when we got into basic training and they told us, hey, you have to learn this and learn it quick because you're going to Vietnam. Vietnam, what? You're going to kill Charlie Kong. And they started messing with our minds and brainwashing us unto the point that all we dream about was going to Vietnam and kill, 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 kill. When I arrived there, and I started seeing the people there, it just reminded me of my country, because I was coming from the same country. Vietnam and Puerto Rico, where I'm from, lie in the same parallel. Same weather, same fruits, same everything, and the same little people just like me. And I was seeing my people washing their clothes in the rivers, drinking from the wells, as we in Puerto Rico. That brought me back. That's when I started thinking, hey, this is not right. But I was a soldier. I was there to follow orders, and that I did. I left Vietnam in December '67, but Vietnam have never left me. It's in my heart, it's in my mind, and Vietnam's got me sick with the Agent Orange, to the point right now that many of us are just at a young age, that we still are in our 70s, we're just dying left and right because the United States of America is still killing us. That's what I feel about my perspective of the war. Vietnam is in me. It will never leave us, for all of us that went to Vietnam, because we feel Vietnam in us. We saw what we did, and now that we have been educated, it was wrong.
Liam,
Should have never been there.
Liam, for you growing up in Vietnam, you were 2 when the war ended, and your father was a police officer there. And Sergeant Gomez talks about, education. You would hear from your father, as you've explained to me, about his experience and his perspective, and he was very anti the Northern regime at that point. For you as a child, though, hearing the stories from your father, what was your perspective of what he was telling you at that time?
Yeah, like any typical sons in Vietnam, we always respect our father, for sure. We listen to him on almost everything. But every day at that time, we watch movies, news, came to school, to take everything was written there in the textbook to tell bad things about evil Americans or bad Vietnamese officers who used to kill pregnant women, something like that, women. So I got used to it, and I was brainwashed a little bit. So kind of when we turned on the TV and we saw on the movies about, bad things about America, of course, produced by North Vietnamese. So I thought, like my father told me, turn it off. Those are lying. But I didn't listen to him, because every day, 1 day, 1 year, 2 years, we always heard bad things about Americans. So I said maybe he was the loser. He hated the current government. But every day we heard about, we are trying to build up the country because the U.S. people destroyed us badly. So now it took time. You know what I mean? So that's why I didn't listen to my father about the war.
Initially, right?
Initially. But then when I grew up, had more chance to read more news, more like from both sides, and I realized they were lying. And now the new generation like us, we believe that we were brainwashed a little bit.
Tom, for you living here in America, you were among people who opposed the war almost from the beginning. You did a lot of research to arrive at that perspective. You even convinced your father, who was in the Navy, that your position held as an anti-war person was the position that he eventually agreed to. The research that you did and the opinion that you came to hold, how were you able to arrive at that? Even though media was telling you, or the sentiment at the time was pretty much supporting the war.
Right. I grew up in the Navy. My dad was in for 30 years in the Navy. He was a dentist. He was kind of a small-town dentist in a uniform, not the great Santini, militaristic kind of guy, but an amateur historian. So he loved to read history. When I went to the University of Virginia in 1964, I got involved with a civil rights group that was organizing. There were 8 black students out of 10,000 at that time. It was just beginning to desegregate. And in that organization, there were these discussions, people raising, even in 64, 65, questions about the Vietnam, being involved in Vietnam. Well, I had planned most of my life to be either a Navy SEAL or I was going to go to the Naval Academy, and swimming coach was going to help me get in. That was my plan. My good friend from high school, Bill, he went to West Point. We used to have these discussions, diplomacy or military, what's the best way to approach things? He did two terms in Vietnam. We've been in touch a lot lately, that's why I'm thinking about him, and had some very good discussions. And one of the things that we sort of both realized, is that all of us were so young. Now we have our experiences, we have our opinions about what we did. We were 18 and 19 years old trying to figure this out. And my first response when the discussion came up about Vietnam was, no, we have to stop the communists. I'd read Tom Dooley's book, and it was terrible. We had to stop the communists. And we shouldn't take a position against the war because that would hurt the civil rights efforts. These were the debates that were going on throughout the civil rights movement.
And that was a belief that Martin Luther King himself held for quite a while as well, right, in terms of holding where he was and not coming out against the war. Yeah, and I was bothered in these arguments because I wasn't doing too well, and I'd been president of my debating club in high school, and I was, I didn't like losing debates. So I went to the library and I read everything I could possibly find on the history of Vietnam, and discovered I was not doing well because they were right and I was wrong. We really were. It was the wrong place to be. It was the wrong kind of commitment for the U.S. to make, and I wanted to believe the best. I grew up in the 50s. John Kennedy put out this ideal for us, and you wanted to believe that America was only the good guys. We couldn't possibly be on the wrong side. We were always going to be doing the right thing. So it was very hard to come to. One mentor of mine, Ann Braden, made the comment that she thought a lot of us, my folks are from Kentucky, I'm a Southerner, a lot of us who were in Southern white kids who got involved in the civil rights movement had already seen through the lies of the people in power because we overcame the racism that we had been growing up with. And by that token, we sort of had come to be skeptical about what was being told to us from folks in power. And so once I began to study Vietnam and I compare that to what I was hearing from the White House, it was not as big a step to realize we're being lied to again. And then I got involved really more in the civil rights movement for the first several years, but later in the anti-Vietnam War movement. And to decide to drop out of school to be full-time activist in the civil rights movement, had to decide, am I going to give up the student deferment and take the risk? Open you up to the draft.
Yes, and take the risk of going to prison. And I decided I was willing to take that risk to do what I felt was the right thing to do. The other thing I just wanted to say is to thank WGBY for putting on this discussion. I just think it's one of the tough things that my generation has had trouble talking to each other about. People who went, people who didn't go. My friend Tom Weiner is in the audience, who wrote a book called Called to Serve, which is a real service in a similar way to this dialogue because it brings together the stories of so many people who had different experiences. Chris's book, Patriots, did a similar thing. You were able to see all sides of the perspective, people's own experiences. They shaped where we ended up. And it's been very hard for our generation to reconnect and get over some of the divisions that we had then. And now we have a very divided society, so maybe we can provide a role model for our society now. Yes, you can have strong differences, but you can still have a dialogue, and you can still respect each other and respect our experiences, and again, know that we were very young when we made the decisions we made.
You mentioned Tom's book. Tom, if you would, I'd like to ask you a question. I know that we actually, yes, please go to the microphone. Tom, you were in the book, and Mr. Cervantes, you were also featured in that book. For you, gathering those stories about people who were confronted by the draft who live in this region, why was that an important story for you to tell?
I want to also point out that Doug Anderson, who's in the audience, is also in the book.
Doug, poet, yes.
And I actually interviewed 62 people, men and women, because I wanted the stories to be including the experience of women. And 32 are in the book, and then a play was made from the book with 10 of the stories from the book in the play, and one of those is Tom Gardner's story. Why I chose to do it, for several reasons. First of all, I was very conscious of the fact that even though we're still young, as was pointed out, we're getting older by the day, and the stories that we are all carrying from our generation, since everyone had something affected by the Vietnam War, were going to be lost if there was no way to preserve them. Chris's book inspired me to write my book, in fact, because his book, Patriots, The War from All Sides, clearly made an effort to have the story told from various perspectives, including people from Vietnam, which I didn't get to do, but I was determined to, in addition to preserving the stories, and now they've been digitized and they're archived at the UMass library, in addition to preserving them so future generations would have a record of what people went through, and also future generations could see it as maybe a cautionary tale, so that people would say, wait, maybe I don't need to participate in a war that's not needing to be fought, as I feel Vietnam was. So for the younger generation, and I know that there are people in other parts of the country who've used the book as an instructional tool with young people around the Iraq War starting. If there was going to be a draft, how would they respond? So that was one motivation. Another motivation is really what Tom was just speaking to have it be a force that could work towards some of this dialogue and some of the healing that still hasn't taken place 40 years after the war ended. The desire to have people, there are chapters that are for those who served, those who left the country for Canada and elsewhere, those who resisted the draft and went to jail, those who chose conscientious objection, those who beat the draft with high numbers in the lottery or by pretending they were gay or mentally ill or on drugs. And the last chapter is called Those Who Loved, Counseled, and Supported, and it's a chapter for women, two of whom went with their men to Canada. Frances Crowe, whose story is phenomenal about starting her own draft counseling center, and then Penny Rock, a nurse. So I wanted all those voices to be heard and to interact with each other, which is one of the powerful parts of the play, because each of those choices is represented in the play, so that people could see, well, wait a minute, so you had this experience that you brought to the decision, and that's why you made that choice? Wait, that makes more sense to me now. Now I can understand what motivated you to enlist or go to Vietnam or whatever the choice was, or become a conscientious objector. So now I can understand, and maybe we can talk to each other. And that's what's happened. There was a moment during the staged reading at Smith where one of the people who was in Vietnam and someone who was in Canada had a really difficult encounter. In fact, the Vietnam veteran called him a coward. And then within the next couple months, it was actually the night of the play premiering in Boston. They saw each other again, and the man who had said that the man who went to Canada was a coward talked to him for about 45 minutes and then reached his hand over and said, I owe you an apology. And that's why I wrote the book, for moments like that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You spoke about, you can have a seat, sure, thanks. You spoke about, tough choices that are made, and it occurs to me that in Vietnam, for many, there wasn't a choice. You were drafted, you served the country, and another thing that comes to mind is the issue of race. Tom mentioned the civil rights movement, which was raging here in this country, and then some of our veterans went to serve, and they found that they were surrounded by predominantly African American or perhaps Hispanic, which we know at this point were drafted at a higher number than were white people. I wonder if any of the veterans or Mr. Sergeant Gomez, if you wanted to speak to the issue of race as part of the war. Oh, thank you, sir. Please come, Sergeant Gomez. Just one moment.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Cummings. I did 2 tours over there. Talking about race, when we went over there, when a black man went over there, the first thing we were said when we got off a plane by a Vietnamese child was where our tails were. And we would look at each other like, what are these kids talking about? You had a lot of American white soldiers went over there and told these people this. Now, to this day, I really don't understand why we were over there. All right? I still have problems today. I still have flashbacks about it. It upsets the hell out of me. But, our government did not inform us of anything. They told us, this is where you're going. If you don't go, you're going to jail. And a lot of black people who was in urban areas and poor had no choice. We really had no choice what to do. We had no choice but go over there. And to this day, we're still getting treated like dogs. I'm serious. When I came back, I was spit on, had cans. I was hit in the head with soda cans. I had rocks thrown at me. I was called baby killers. But them people over there, they killed a lot of us. I mean, a lot of us. I've seen kids blow up a lot of GIs and vets, and still to this day it hurts me. You know, we really didn't know who we were fighting. I am dead serious. We didn't know we were fighting the Viet Congs or the Vietnamese because we had people on both sides. So, you know, it's a shame, you know, it waited all this time for it to come out. But our government, when we got home, they just sent us home. They said, you ain't seen nothing, you ain't did nothing, you don't know nothing. And you still have vets out there today who are walking the streets where their minds are all messed up from this war. My mind is still messed up. Just like the gentleman said up there, I'm going to remember to the day I die. Certain people I can talk to it about, certain people, like civilian people, I cannot talk to. Another Vietnam vet, we can understand each other. But y'all who are civilians, trying to explain to y'all what we went through and what we had to do over there, it's ridiculous.
Is there something that civilians such as myself could do or say to help open up a dialogue with someone like yourself?
More education about it, all right? More education about Vietnam. Because like a lot of us, we went over there, this was jungle warfare. They didn't tell us nothing about no jungle warfare. You went through basic training, AIT, and they shipped you out. That's all you knew. I mean, half of the stuff that went on over there was crazy. Our country really had no business being over there. To this day, I believe it. I went to my grave with it. We had no business being over there because we didn't even know who we were fighting, or what we were fighting for.
Thank you for sharing. Chris, can I pull you into the conversation? So give us some perspective about, you know, maybe what we were being told by the government, what Americans were being told, and what was actually happening as we were looking to enter Vietnam.
Yeah, well, we'd need more than an hour to chart all the lies that were told, but the government really did, especially early on, make the very, I think, effective rhetorical case that we were a force for good in the world, that we were on the side of democracy and self-determination, that we simply wanted to go over to South Vietnam to help this poor country defend itself against external aggression from the communist north. And so I think a lot of guys who went over there thought that they were going to help the people of South Vietnam, but only to find out when they got there they were not being greeted as liberators, that they were engaged in this impossible counterinsurgency in which it was really difficult to distinguish between civilians and combatants, and that American policy had nothing to do with protecting villages or gaining and securing territory, but simply going out on search and destroy missions and trying to kill as many people as possible. So I think that veterans more than anybody saw the striking contradiction between American policy as it was sold and justified and the way it actually unfolded in the war zone. And ultimately, I think that's one of the reasons why veterans understandably feel a powerful sense of betrayal, that they were really sold a bill of goods.
You point out in American Reckoning that the Assistant Secretary of Defense said at one point in a memo that 70% of the reason that we were there was to avoid something that would be humiliating.
Yeah, isn't that shocking? I mean, that came out with the Pentagon Papers. That was a secret, internal document. But what that speaks to is that by the middle 60s, most policymakers no longer really even believed that Vietnam had anything to do with American security. Didn't even believe anymore in the domino theory that we had to hold the line there. And they had internally great pessimism about our ability to achieve our objectives. But some policymakers, like this guy George Bundy, said, you know what, Mr. President, even if we don't succeed, even if bombing doesn't do anything, it'll be worth it, because it'll demonstrate that we are willing to stick with our commitments, and this is going to be important for our reputation abroad, our willingness to be bloodied and to bloody other people. It really was, again, more about, by the mid-60s, I think more about preserving our national reputation than anything to do with defending an ally in South Vietnam.
Do you have a question or comment, sir?
Yes, I have a comment. My name is Thomas Belton. I'm the Director of Veteran Services for the City of Springfield. And in addition to that, I am one of the charter members of the Winchester Square Vietnam Era Veterans of the City of Springfield that has been a chartered organization for about 45 years. We touched on racism, and we flew by racism so fast I couldn't even believe it. So I have to come up here and make a couple comments, because I said when it gets to the point that they're not dealing with it, I'm going to the mic. Now, I'm going to start talking about racism from the standpoint that Vietnam was the first integrated war the United States ever fought, where black and white troops fought side by side. But before you get there, you got to get through boot camp. And in the 60s, when I went to Beaufort, no, not Beaufort, was it Beaufort, South Carolina? Beaufort, South Carolina, Parris Island. Never went down south before. But you got to understand what the climate was like in the 60s. You had civil unrest. You had war going on in Vietnam. And you had this project called the draft. Now, some people got drafted. Some people got volunteered. Me, I had a deferment because I was working at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft, and I didn't have to go. But all my friends that looked like me were going, so I said I'm going too. And when I got to Parris Island, I knew I had made a mistake. But my brother was a Marine. My cousin was one of the first black Marines in the Marine Corps. And 2 years ago, he went to the White House and received the Congressional Gold Medal for being one of the surviving Montford Point Marines. So there was some history about being a Marine. And my brother told me, you're the baby of the family, you'll never cut it. So as soon as I got old enough to leave and go, I had to make my mark. But when I got to Parris Island, I found out I was not a welcome guest there. Now, they've changed boot camp significantly in how they get in your face down there. They don't do that no more because they say that can cause too much trauma for folks. But when I went through, I got to Parris Island shortly after they had marched Marines into the swamp and Marines had died. So they were very sensitive about how they were handling Marines down there. But they were not always overly sensitive to people who looked like me. And there was this thing that they called Project 100,000, McNamara's Follies. A lot of people don't talk about it because that was like an era in America that we don't want to own up to. But the draft sucked up so many people that the war machine didn't have no more people to suck up. So it was interesting. From my perspective, I found out that America fought two wars simultaneously. They fought the Civil Rights War in America, and they fought the Vietnam War. But the interesting thing, when I was going in, they had the recruiter on the right-hand side, and you had jail on the left-hand side. And some folks had to make a choice. And between the two, some folks said, I'm going to Vietnam. But also, there was this other thing going on in America with some of the folks that looked like me. Some of them even believed that they had to go to Vietnam to prove that they could die just as well as a non-veteran. And that is a strange headset that stays with me every day. And the indoctrination that you get in boot camp, it stays with you forever. two things stay with you: that indoctrination you got in boot camp and the Vietnam War. And each day it's an issue of what's on first, that indoctrination or the war. And the reason I had to come back up here, because I was talking to several folks that are in the audience today, and I said, if they glaze over that, I'm going to spring up to that microphone real quick. Now, the gentleman on the other side talked about the war, but he moved past it too quick for me. When I was in Vietnam, I met a war correspondent by the name of Wallace Terry. And Wallace Terry spent a lot of time talking to people of color. And he wrote a book called Bloods, The Oral History of the Vietnam War by Blacks. And for about the last maybe 22 years or so, there's a gentleman up at a local college, Smith College, Lewis Wilson, who's the head of the chair of the history department, Black History Department. He's been using a book called Bloods.
Mr. Belton, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your comment, and
wrap it up.
I'll give you a moment, but I just wanted to invite someone else into the conversation.
Because I will wrap it up because once again, the topic is not a good topic, so I'll wrap it up because what's going on in America right now was going on 50 years ago.
It has to do with the fact that this is a community dialogue, and we want to invite everyone to share their perspectives. Thank you very much. Sir.
My name's Jim Monroe. In the summer of 1967 at Parris Island, my three drill instructors were all from the South and white, and it was my first experience of overwhelming, blatant racism.
Thank you for sharing. Tom, oh.
Another thing, y'all calling it a war. It wasn't. They considered Vietnam was a conflict at the time we were in there. Now today, y'all giving us credit saying we were at a war. Why didn't y'all do this back then? I mean, why did y'all wait so long to change it? I mean, a lot of guys have died for Agent Orange and all kinds of diseases. People who are left here, their family is not getting none of the benefits or nothing. And it's wrong. This should have been done instead of 20, 40 years later. It should have been done the day this stuff started.
Tom, I know you were working here on the anti-war front as well as the civil rights front. For you, at one point, did those two areas converge where people were working together in any regard in that way?
Well, certainly. I mean, we know that people on the sort of front lines of the civil rights movement, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and others began to question the war. Eventually, Martin Luther King came out in his famous Riverside speech against the war. So people really began to make those connections. Muhammad Ali probably made it as clear as anybody possibly could in his statements, which I'm sure everyone has seen. During that time, I was working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and an organization that came out of that called the Southern Student Organizing Committee, and I was actually doing research on racism in the selective service system, because in the South, those draft boards were all white. And when it came down to filling the draft quota, community by community, guess who got drafted? Not their buddies on the country club, not their buddies in the hunt and fish club. They went for black and poor. And those were the people that they filled the draft card with. And, you know, there was even a case in Virginia that I was in the Civil Rights Project in Virginia. Now, Virginia closed its public schools to keep from desegregating them for a time. Right? So that meant that for a time period, you could not be in school. There was a young man in the south side part of Virginia who was being drafted because he'd gone back to school finally when the schools reopened, but now he was past the age because they closed the public schools, and they wanted to draft him. He was the sole support of his family. He was, working his way through school. And I actually contacted a young senator who had gone to the University of Virginia Law School, so I tried to make that connection, in Massachusetts, who intervened and helped him get his deferment. And that young senator was named Ted Kennedy. But I worked on several cases where people were trying to challenge their draft orders based on the racism of the system. It wasn't accidental that the makeup of the troops that went to Vietnam and that died disproportionately in the front lines in combat were, black and Hispanic and poor. That's where they filled those numbers from. And it was when they canceled student deferments that we saw an uptick of protests on the campuses, like all of a sudden people were now subject to it that were not before. I'd been traveling around southern campuses giving talks on the war. Maybe 10, 12, 15 people would show up. Once they canceled those student deferments, there were 200 people who now, we want to know about this war. And that's when people really started paying attention.
Sir, please, and you'll go next.
My name is Chris Gaffron. I just want to say it's humbling to be in the presence of these folks who went over there and fought in conditions that we can't understand. I mean, I get upset when we're in traffic for 15 minutes, so, I can't imagine what you folks have dealt with, and I appreciate your service. I thank you. Can you tell us, Professor and Sergeant Gomez, what a day was like over there in Vietnam? What was a daily routine? What did you eat? What were the bathroom conditions like? Was it hot? Can you just tell us what a day was like?
Oh, just depend where were you on that day. If you happen to be in base camp, it was a regular detailed day where for us Hispanics and blacks, our job was to burn excrement. That was our prime job. If we were in base camp, we were detailed to burn excrement.
That's the beauty of asking a question, because you never think somebody's going to answer with that.
And from there was, the whole day was just work, work, work. You were filling sandbags, or you were in guard duty, or you were doing KP at the mess hall. If you were in the field, now let me go back a little, because there were three groups in Vietnam when you were in base camp. You had your whites, you had your blacks, and you have your Hispanics. And all three groups were segregated in base camp.
At that point?
Yeah, we segregated ourselves, and the commanders and the NCOs, senior NCOs, allow us to segregate ourselves. So in base camp, it was going on, and nobody was doing nothing about it. Now, once we went into the field, knowing that we needed each other to protect our backs, then we were good. We were accepted, and we were used. And for the most part, you are up front or you're a man in a machine gun.
But how does that tension work if you're segregating in camp, but then going out into the field and working as a group? Was there tension at all amongst yourselves?
It was your life. You either work together or get killed. So that's why we needed each other out there. But once we were in base camp, hey, white, black, Hispanic, I don't need you anymore. Go do your own thing. But the problem here was that the commanders knew what was going on. They knew the segregation, and I believe to this point that they encouraged that segregation because there were little of us, colored folks, in command. Very little of us in command. And if we had a couple stripes, then we were in the field.
Professor Wynn, what was it like being a citizen there?
Being a citizen? Go ahead.
I think it changed a little bit now, but for sure, for those who have their parents working for the South, for the America, we always had tough life, even until now. So there is no way for us to climb up on the ladder in the state agencies, because they need us to be the communist, and they track like 3 generations. So if my father worked for the former government, there's no way for me to become a communist, and there's no way for me to climb up the with the ladder. Yeah.
And you struggled. You've been in the States about a decade, right? And so you were there for quite some time, living under that. At what point did you make the decision that you no longer felt it would be suitable for you to live in Vietnam under those conditions?
Actually, there was still chance for us for example, we don't need to work for the government, but I work for ExxonMobil, so I live quite comfortably there. But when I had my daughter, and I knew for sure that, there is only way for her to grow up like comfortably, to work for the corporations, but not for the government, cannot pursue anything. So I decided maybe I will try, because ExxonMobil sent me to Australia and Hong Kong and Singapore for a few months. So I could see the opportunities for my daughter. And then I applied for the scholarship, and I got accepted into Japan, studied there for my MBA, and then I came here for my PhD.
I want to step back just for a moment. If you don't mind, can you talk about what it was like growing up post-war and some of the struggles? I know your family struggled for many years following the war.
It was horrible, because at that time, they could confiscate anything in your family, in your home. For example, if we had the fridge, the refrigerator, they could come and then take it, because they said it belongs to capitalism. They could do anything. So, and like 500,000 men were in educational camp, but actually in prison. So,
That was an effort after the war to re-educate the population, right?
So we didn't have any voice. Like the Southerners didn't have any voice. So we know that they were treating us unfair, but we didn't have any, because they didn't allow like 3 or 5 men to gather together. So things like that. So we didn't have any voice. And we know for sure, because from the communists, they had better chance. But we couldn't have any chance, for sure. But we didn't have any voice.
No voice at all?
No voice, because the police everywhere.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Sir, did you have a comment that you wanted to make? Yeah.
When I signed up, I didn't sign up for any political reasons. I was sort of a nerd in high school and was the butt of jokes and that kind of thing. I said, I'm going to be a Marine. I'm going to be a man. And I'll tell you, when I got out of boot camp, I felt like I was on top of the world. A couple of years later, when I finally went to Vietnam, things started happening. I mean, I was aware of the racism, but at the time, I got to tell you, I was too self-centered to take much note of it. What I did take note of is when I first got off the plane, we landed in Da Nang, and the air was just so hot, it was almost overpowering. And to this day, if I'm in a car with the heater blowing in my face, my body still feels the fear and the rest of it. I didn't care about politics. All I know is that when the things went down, the only person in the world was the guy next to you. And you had to understand that you had to be there for him. And I wasn't a hero or anything, but that's where my head was. I had to be there for the guy next to me. And fortunately for me, some of them were black. Then they sent me from the field, they sent me to, I had been on the hospital ship. I got hit by a piece of shrapnel, and I was gone for a month, and they sent me back, but I was a little leery when the time the round went off. So they sent me to a place that would be comfortable. I could, was nothing really going on. And that was Quezon. I got there in December, and when February hit, it was amazing. All I understand now is that when I was over there, when I thought about politics, it had nothing to do with whether war was right or wrong. I could care less. What I had to do was that when people started saying things about people like Jane Fonda and stuff like that, you know, my only question was, why are they upset about her? Isn't that the reason we were over there? So that people had that kind of right to be able to do that? So when I got back to the United States, I did my very best, and I turned on, tuned in, and dropped out. Now, at 71 years old, I realized that, you know, my wife and I separated recently, and although I can still see my grandson, I'm not with him anymore. And I'm in a shelter wondering what the hell happened, because I haven't got a goddamn clue. I just really don't know.
Sergeant Gomez, let me just for a moment, Don. Let me bring you into the conversation here. To the gentleman's point, you know, what can a veteran such as himself do? What services are available? Ways that our community can support this gentleman?
I've got the services. I mean, I'm 100% disabled. What the hell does all that mean? I just don't know. And I've been through like 20 years of therapy. I've been through the PTSD ward 3 goddamn times. And none of it seems to matter as far as that's concerned.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your perspective, sir. But any advice you would offer, Sergeant Gomez?
Services, because I know we have an audience out there that is watching, and many veterans out there. If you're out there and you need the services, right now we have a situation of veterans that were drafted or came out of Vietnam and went right into work. And they forgot about the VA, they forgot about Vietnam, or no, they didn't forget about Vietnam, but they dealt with it in the job because they became jobholics. They just work. Now they're at this age, they're coming home, they're there with mama, and mama is looking at them cross-eyed because she can't understand what this individual's going through because he's been working all his life. Now he's home, and he's climbing the walls with PTSD. And he himself doesn't know what to do. Now they're coming out and looking for those services, and we have to start from square one. I'm a service provider, as is Mr. Tom Belton here and Mr. De Jesus, and they're coming to us for those services. And we encourage you, you're not too old yet, get to us so we can help you to get through the maze of the VA and get you to the right places where you can be helped. PTSD, my friend, I can feel it. I'm 70% PTSD. Tommy's over there, another 70. And we have learned to master our PTSD in a positive way. And that's what we need to do. Take the negative out of the PTSD and put it positive to help others.
Thank you. We're very short on time, so I'll invite you to share your comment briefly, please.
I'll be very quick. My name is Doug Anderson. I was a corpsman with the Marine Infantry Company in I Corps. When I went over, I was propelled by what most men in my generation were driven by. We grew up as the sons of World War II. We believed that this is the right thing to do to serve your country. We believed they were the eternal good guys. When we got there, it wasn't the same. I remember when I got there the first week, I knew something was wrong. The Marines hated the Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese were afraid of the Marines in the areas that we were patrolling. I was truly astonished. I was under the impression that we were over there to help the Vietnamese, and I didn't see this happening. Apparently, CM canceled elections when he figured out that 70 or to 80% of the country were pro-NLF. So we were essentially operating in areas that were in favor of the communists. Basically, we didn't have this. Thank you.
Thank you. You've already spoken, sir, so we have about a minute left, sir.
I really enjoy hearing all of these stories from our soldiers here in America. One point I really want to make, because I know we're short on time, is that in future presentations like this one, I'd love to hear other stories from people from my country, from Vietnam, the people that also did not have choices, people that could not make the choice. They were in the middle of the conflict. They were in the middle of war. The lines between combatant and non-combatants were very small. It was difficult to tell who was a combatant and who was a non-combatant. I'd like to hear those people's stories, the people over there that did not have the choices.
We have about 30 seconds left, so I didn't know if perhaps Sergeant Gomez, you wanted to refer any of our veterans here in the audience, a phone number, just things, a way for someone to get support if they need it.
Well, it's vital that we get to where we need to get to hopefully live a little better life with the years that we got left. You can't do it at home by yourselves and with your spouse because you're going to eat each other up. You're not used to it. She cannot understand you. Your family cannot understand you. The only individuals that can understand you is us, that we're there with you. We can hear you. We can feel with you. We can cry with you if we have to cry, because I do that in my agency every day with my Vietnam veterans. So don't stay home. Don't stay home. We're losing already 22 a day. So don't stay home. And not young veterans, Vietnam veterans.
Thank you very much.
Information on your website, possibly, so we can...
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is all the time we have this evening. Thank you to our panelists, studio audience, and you at home. Please continue to share your thoughts online. To paraphrase author Tom Weiner's conclusion in Call to Serve, I hope the stories shared tonight about the Vietnam War provided some closure to the past and can reframe its influence on the present. For everyone here at WGBY, I'm Carrie Saldo. Good night.
On Masterpiece.
The hero of campaign. Your husband is a reluctant hero, but England may yet have need of him. Truro lacks an MP.
Your influence is great. There's much good you could do.
I'm no Leonardo. You are surely Mona Lisa.
Poldark on Masterpiece.
Poldark continues next on WGBY. Support for WGBY comes from our contributing viewers and by...
Over the past 100 years, locally owned Pride stores have enjoyed serving our local communities. Join us as we celebrate throughout 2017 with special events and drawings for our customers, and especially join us in supporting WGBY.
Everybody, how do you do? The people! We're kids. We were all pretty scared.
We had each other, and we brought that to the music. I always like singing Help because I meant it. It's real.
Go behind the scenes with the Beatles on tour November 25th.
Your favorite PBS Kids characters stepped out of the TV screen and onto the floor of the Basketball Hall of Fame at WGBY Fan Day.
There's lots of activities to do.
It was like a comic book convention for PBS Kids with